Hi, welcome. My name is Amy and I am a true crime YouTuber from Australia. If you like what you see today, please consider liking and subscribing to this channel. It helps me a lot and I appreciate it. I appreciate you all being here. Go grab a coffee, a tea, or whatever tickles your fancy and let's get into it. Today's case is about Gypsy Rose Blanchard. I had a few of you messaging me asking about this case, and to be honest with you, I thought pretty much the whole world knew about this case. I have been following this case since 2015. It's one of those cases that has just been so puzzling and sad and it just draws you in, and I just feel like I kept going back to it. And to be honest with you, I'm actually really excited to be talking about this case because Gypsy actually was released a couple of days ago and there has been a lot of hype around her and her release, and she is doing amazing. And I do encourage you to base your own opinion on what you hear today and what you read online, because it isn't just a black and white case. It is very, very grey. Gypsy was born on 27th of July in 1991 in Golden Meadow, Louisiana, USA. Gypsy's parents were young when they had her. Her mother, Claudine, who went by the name Dee Dee, was 24 and her dad, Rod, was only 17. Shortly before Gypsy was born, the couple separated after 6 months of dating. Rod actually realized that he may have gotten married way too young and wasn't in the marriage for the right reason. He was going to continue supporting Claudine and Gypsy when she was born, but didn't want to continue playing happy family when he wasn't happy. And honestly, good for him. Not long after, Gypsy's father had remarried and Dee Dee and Gypsy moved in with Dee Dee's parents. They later said that when preparing food for the stepmother, Dee Dee poisoned it with Roundup weed killer, leading to the stepmother's chronic illness during this period. Dee Dee was actually arrested for several minor offenses during this time period, including writing bad checks. When Dee Dee's father and stepmother confronted Dee Dee about some of the things that she was doing with Gypsy, and when they actually addressed Dee Dee about the suspicion of her involvement with her stepmother's chronic illness, Dee Dee packed up and left with Gypsy and she headed over to New Orleans and lived in the suburb Slidell. And ironically, Dee Dee's stepmother's health actually improved 100%. I mean, that's suspicious. In Slidell, Dee Dee and Gypsy lived in public housing. They paid their bills with Rod's child support and public assistance payments. Dee Dee was granted these public assistance payments because of Gypsy's illnesses. Gypsy apparently was a very unwell child. Now, Gypsy apparently had various medical conditions from a very young age. Dee Dee saw various specialists, mostly at Tulane Medical Center and the Children's Hospital of New Orleans, seeking treatment for the illnesses Dee Dee claimed Gypsy had, which now included hearing and vision problems. While a muscle biopsy found no sign of the muscular dystrophy Dee Dee insisted Gypsy had, she was successful in securing treatment for Gypsy's other purported issues. She told doctors that Gypsy had seizures every few months. They prescribed anti-seizure medication to Gypsy. Several surgeries were performed on Gypsy during this time as well. And Dee Dee regularly took Gypsy to the emergency room just for minor things that really shouldn't be treated in the emergency department. Gypsy's dad absolutely adored his daughter, and Rod was a big part of her upbringing. He was a present dad. However, according to Rod, by the time Gypsy was 3 months old, Dee Dee was convinced that she had sleep apnea and began taking her to the hospital, where repeated overnight stays with a sleep monitor and other tests found no sign of the condition. Dee Dee subsequently became convinced Gypsy had a wide range of health issues, which she attributed to an unspecified chromosomal disorder. It was also said that Gypsy had leukemia, asthma, muscular dystrophy, and the mental capacity of a 7-year-old due to brain damage. And this was due to the fact that Gypsy was born prematurely. A few examples of the kind of medical stories that Dee Dee made up and was happy to share with anyone who would listen starts with one time where Gypsy actually said she was around 7 or 8 when this happened. She was riding on her grandfather's motorcycle where they were involved in a very minor accident, where she obtained a slight abrasion on her knee, just like a scratch, as if you would trip and fall over. And due to this incident, Dee Dee clearly took her to the emergency room, and this is where the wheelchair started to make an appearance. Dee Dee told Gypsy that she would now need to start using a wheelchair, that she was unwell, and it all was triggered because she had scraped her knee. Gypsy also attended the Special Olympics quite often with both of her parents. In 2001, Dee Dee claimed that Gypsy was 8 years old, but she was actually 10. Gypsy went on to be named the honorary queen of the crew of Mid-City, a child-orientated parade held during Mardi Gras in New Orleans. What a strange thing to lie about your child's age, and all to win a local contest. But this is a pattern that you'll start to see as this case evolves. It's also interesting to note that Dee didn't enroll Gypsy into any type of schooling. It's said that Gypsy may have gone up to 2nd grade, but that's still very much a grey area. It's actually not unfair to assume that Gypsy may not have attended school past the kindergarten age, which is very sad. Dee Dee reportedly decided to homeschool Gypsy because she felt that that would be better, and it would better suit the illnesses that Gypsy has, because they were so severe and Dee Dee needed to be with her at all times. But this really wasn't for empathetic or caring reasons. It was believed to have been a way to isolate Gypsy further to her own mother's abuse. Despite Gypsy not being in mainstream school or not even homeschooled, let's be honest, Gypsy managed to learn to read all by herself. And it was thanks to the Harry Potter books. Gypsy had read them over and over and over and over again. And this, in return, built her vocabulary over time. After Hurricane Katrina devastated the area in August 2005, Dee Dee and Gypsy left their ruined apartment for a shelter in Covington, which was set up for people with special needs. Dee Dee said that Gypsy's medical records, including her birth certificate, had been destroyed in the flooding. A doctor working from the shelter suggested that Dee Dee and Gypsy relocate to Dee Dee's native Missouri hometown, and the next month they were airlifted there. At first, Dee Dee and Gypsy lived in a rental home in Aurora, in southwestern of Missouri. During their time there, Gypsy was honoured by the Oley Foundation, which advocates for the rights of feeding tube recipients, as its 2007 Child of the Year. In 2008, Habitat for Humanity built them a small home with a wheelchair ramp and hot tub as part of a larger project on the north side of Springfield, and the two moved there. The story of a single mother with a severely disabled child forced to flee Katrina's devastation began to receive a considerable amount of media attention. And the community, because they were so caring and loving, they started to contribute to Dee Dee and Gypsy. They were happy to pitch in and help wherever they were needed. There was absolutely nothing required in return. They were just being a loving, helpful community. The outpouring of support included many charitable contributions. In Louisiana, Dee Dee and Gypsy had occasional stays in the Ronald McDonald House. They actually were prioritized, and they always were able to get a room sorted for them. No issues, they didn't have to stress. And this was during every medical appointment, and as you can imagine, Gypsy had a lot of appointments that she would need to go to. She was a sick girl. In Missouri, they received free flights to see doctors at the Children's Mercy Hospital in Kansas City, free trips to Walt Disney World, and backstage passes to Miranda Lambert concerts, where she was frequently photographed with Gypsy. And this was all linked to the Make-A-Wish Foundation. Dee Dee and Gypsy were very big Miranda Lambert fans. Gypsy's dad Rod also continued to make monthly repayments of $1,200, as well as sending Gypsy gifts and occasionally talking to her on the phone. During one call, on Gypsy's 18th birthday, he recalls Dee Dee telling him not to mention his daughter's real birthday, because on Gypsy's 18th birthday, she actually thought that she was 14. Rod and his second wife hoped to get out to Springfield to visit his daughter, but for a variety of reasons, Dee Dee always happened to just change plans, so nothing really lined up and they weren't able to visit Gypsy as much as they had hoped to. She told her neighbors in Springfield that Gypsy's father was an abusive drug addict and alcoholic who would never come to terms with his daughter's health issues and never sent them any money, which obviously was a blatant lie and just another way to gain control over Gypsy and her life by alienating her father, a father who actually cared and gave a crap about his daughter, a father who paid child support, a father that was trying his hardest to do what he could to be with his daughter. Not only that, Rod's wife, Gypsy's stepmom, wanted a relationship with her stepdaughter, and they also had their own daughter together, Rod and his new wife. So Gypsy had a stepsister, and they all wanted to have really good, strong relationships, and they just weren't given the opportunity to start creating them. Many people who met Gypsy were charmed by her. Her 5-foot high, nearly toothless mouth, large glasses, and high childlike voice reinforced the perception that she had all the problems her mother claimed she did. Dee Dee regularly shaved Gypsy's head to mimic the hairless look that a chemotherapy patient would have, telling Gypsy that she was shaving it because, well, eventually the medication you're on, your hair's gonna fall out, so may as well do it now. Gypsy often wore wigs or hats to hide her baldness. Whenever they would leave the house, Dee Dee always took an oxygen tank and feeding tube with them. Gypsy was actually being fed by a tube well into her 20s, and it wasn't something that felt unusual to her. This was her life. She was used to it from a very young age. Dee Dee also used physical abuse to control Gypsy, always holding her hand tightly in the presence of others. When Gypsy said something that suggested she was not genuinely sick or seemed beyond her purported mental capacity, Gypsy recalls that her mother would squeeze her hand very tightly. When the two were alone, Dee Dee would often strike her with an open hand or coat hangers. Medical interventions continued throughout the years. Dee Dee had some of Gypsy's saliva glands treated with Botox, then extracted altogether to control her reported drooling. However, it was later reported that Dee Dee induced drooling by using a topical medication to numb her gums before doctor visits. So it was like an anesthetic that you could buy over the counter. She would pop it on her gums to increase drooling so that doctors would believe her. The lack of salivary glands, coupled with the anti-seizure medication, this actually caused Gypsy's teeth to decay and essentially crumble out of her mouth. Majority of her front teeth were completely extracted and replaced by a bridge. Tubes were also implanted in her ears, and these were installed because she had a lot of ear infections. They were just happening non-stop. And for those of you who may not know, tubes are popped in your ears to help drain the excess fluid. This poor girl, it sounds like absolute hell being Gypsy, but the saddest thing about this is that Gypsy doesn't know any different. She doesn't know that she doesn't need to be taking this medication or having these surgical procedures. Gypsy just thinks that this is her life. She doesn't know any different. This has been her life since 3 months old. Gypsy saw a pediatric neurologist by the name of Bernardo Flasterstein, who was a specialist based in Springfield. He started to become suspicious of Gypsy's muscular dystrophy diagnosis. He ordered MRIs and blood tests, which found no abnormalities. He actually said to Dee Dee one time that he doesn't see any reason why she doesn't walk. And the reasoning for this comment is because he actually saw Gypsy walk with his own eyes. She was standing up and supporting her own weight. And this happened when they were attending a follow-up appointment, which I don't know about you, but she shouldn't be even able to stand. She has such deterioration. She needs this medication. She is so sick. She should not be able to stand. She should be wheelchair bound. Flasterstein had a lot of concerns and actually contacted other doctors that Dee Dee and Gypsy had seen in the past. After contacting one of Gypsy's doctors in New Orleans, he learnt that Gypsy's original muscle biopsy had actually come back negative, undermining Dee Dee's reported diagnosis of muscular dystrophy, as well as her claim that all Gypsy's records had been destroyed by flooding. He suspected that Dee Dee possibly had Munchausen syndrome by proxy. After all of this, Dee Dee actually tried to gain access to Dr. Flasterstein's notes and subsequently stopped taking Gypsy to see him. Unfortunately, he did not follow up by reporting Dee Dee. He didn't even contact social services. He said that the other doctors really didn't think that there would be much point in reporting. He said other doctors had told him to treat the pair with golden gloves and doubted the authorities would believe him anyways. In 2009, an anonymous caller told the police about Dee Dee's use of different birth dates and different names for herself and Gypsy, and suggested that her daughter was in better health than they had been made to believe. Officers went out and performed a wellness check, but accepted Dee Dee's explanation. And Dee Dee made up some story and told the police that it was on purpose. She used different birth dates and names because she was trying to escape her abusive ex-husband. And she essentially didn't want him to find Gypsy or her. He was abusive, he was horrible, and they just wanted to live their life in peace, and that was the reason why she lied. However, you would think that the police would maybe call Rod, get his side of the story, but they didn't. They determined that Gypsy seemed genuinely disabled and they closed the case. Dee Dee seems to have at least once forged a copy of Gypsy's birth certificate, changing her birth date to 1995 to bolster claims that she was still a teenager. It was reported that for 14 years, Gypsy didn't know her real age, she just believed what Dee Dee told her. She also continued to let everyone know that the birth certificate was destroyed in the Katrina floods, which is a very plausible reason. I would imagine that when your house is flooding very rapidly, you're probably not going to grab anything other than yourself, your pets, and that's probably it. But she was caught out. Dee Dee did sometimes take the genuine real copy of the birth certificate to appointments alongside Gypsy. Gypsy actually saw it one day and became genuinely confused. And she asked her mum, like, why does my birth date say that? It's not that. And then Dee Dee said that, oh no, it's just a misprint. This is your real birth date. The one on the piece of government paper is not. But because Gypsy doesn't have any life experience, she's been sheltered from everything, she wouldn't question it. She doesn't know that government papers, official government papers, cannot have spell checks or misprints. How was Gypsy to know? She had a lot of trust and love for her mother. Since 2001, Gypsy had attended science fiction and fantasy conventions, sometimes in costume, since she could blend into their diverse and inclusive communities in her wheelchair. At a 2011 event, she made what may have been seen as an attempted escape, which ended in a confrontation when her mum found her in a hotel room with a guy that she had met online. In this moment, she actually produced Gypsy's fake birth certificate showing the gentleman her real age. And with this, she would have been under the age of 18, and she threatened this man saying that she will take it to the police. When in fact, Gypsy was over the age of 18, but didn't know any better, didn't know any different. Once they got home, Dee Dee took Gypsy's laptop and smashed it with a hammer, and then went on to threaten Gypsy with, if you do this ever again, I will hammer your fingers off like I hammered your laptop. It was also reported that after this incident, she kept Gypsy handcuffed to her bed for 2 weeks. Dee Dee later told Gypsy that she had filed paperwork with the local police, claiming that Gypsy was mentally incompetent, leading Gypsy to believe that if she ever went to the police, even tried to go to the police, that they wouldn't believe her. Why would they? She's mentally incompetent. Sometime around 2012, Gypsy had continued using the internet. She used the internet once her mum had gone to bed because she knew if Dee Dee saw her on the laptop that she would just absolutely go insane and probably harm her and smash this laptop too. During this time, she made contact online with Nicholas Gojon, a man around her age from Big Bend, Wisconsin, whom she said she had met on a Christian singles website. Nicholas had a criminal record for indecent exposure and a history of mental illness. He also has autism spectrum disorder, also known as ASD. In 2014, Gypsy confided to 23-year-old Aaliyah. Gypsy considered Aaliyah her older sister. despite being closer in age than she realized. Gypsy told Aaliyah that she and Nicholas had discussed eloping and had even chosen names for potential children. So this online romance was moving pretty fast. It was a classic case of young love and thinking that this person that you've just met will be your whole world for the rest of your life. Gypsy and Nicholas flirted online pretty much every night. Their exchanges sometimes using BDSM elements, which was something Nicholas was into. Aaliyah naturally tried to talk Gypsy out of this. She thought that she was just too young and Nick was just too old for her and just saw red flags. She also thought that due to Gypsy's age, potentially she was being groomed by a sexual predator. Aaliyah thought that Gypsy's plans were just dreams and fantasies, and that nothing like this would ever take place. Despite Dee Dee's efforts to stop her daughter from using the internet, which went as far as Dee Dee destroying the laptop and her phone, Gypsy maintained contact with Nicholas, and they were absolutely infatuated with each other. Borderline obsession, dare I say unhealthy obsession. The next year, Gypsy actually paid for Nicholas to come and fly out to Springfield to meet her and her mother. Her plan was for Nick to just casually bump into them while her mother and her were at a movie theater. And the plan also included that both of them would be in some sort of dress-up costume and that they would apparently get to know each other based on that. Like, hey, we both like dressing up, like we should catch up. Like that was their plan, which I kind of understand. Like if someone else was dressed up in a similar costume, you'd probably naturally gravitate towards them and be like, hey, nice costume. So I do see the plan that Gypsy was trying to brew up. And then following that conversation of common interest, Gypsy would then be able to introduce Nicholas to Dee Dee. Nick and Gypsy did eventually meet up, and as soon as they did, Gypsy led him into the bathroom where the two had sex. This interaction obviously made their love for each other very strong, much stronger, and they continued their internet interactions. Once they had finally met, they were more in love with each other than ever, and this is where the plan started to brew for Dee Dee to be killed. Yep, Gypsy wanted her mother gone. On June 14th, 2015, the day of the murder, Nicholas returned to Springfield, arriving while Gypsy and her mother were away at a doctor's appointment. After they had returned home and Dee Dee had gone to sleep, he went to the Blanchard house. Gypsy had let him in and allegedly gave him duct tape, gloves, and a knife with the understanding that he would be using it to kill Dee Dee. Once Nicholas entered the house and made his way to Dee Dee's room, Gypsy hid in a bathroom and covered her ears. She did this because she didn't want to have to hear her mother's screaming as Nicholas stabbed her to death. Nicholas stabbed Dee Dee a total of 17 times, and most of the stab wounds were in her back whilst she was asleep. After the murder was finalized, transaction complete, Nicholas and Gypsy had sex. They went to Gypsy's room, got a little bit hot and heavy, and then they stole $4,000 that Dee Dee had saved. It's reported that this $4,000 cash was actually the child support that Rod had been paying, and Dee Dee just liked to keep some spare when she needed it. The two lovebirds fled to a motel outside Springfield, and they ended up staying here for a few days whilst planning their next move. During that time, they were seen on security cameras at several stores. It was apparent that they both believed they had gotten away with this planned attack and murder. They mailed the murder weapon, the knife, back to Nicholas's home in Wisconsin to avoid being caught with it. Then not long after sending it back to Wisconsin, they both caught a Greyhound bus back to Wisconsin to be at Nicholas's parents' home. There were actually several witnesses who saw the pair on their way to the Greyhound station and noted that Gypsy wore a blonde wig and walked unassisted. There was absolutely no wheelchair in sight. After seeing concerning Facebook statuses posted from Dee Dee's account, the Blanchards' family and friends suspected that something wasn't right. When phone calls went unanswered, several friends and family members went to the Blanchards' home. It wasn't uncommon for Dee Dee and Gypsy to be out at medical appointments, and sometimes they would be out for a few days because they'd have to fly to different states. However, they did see Dee Dee's modified car in the driveway, and they always needed that car for Gypsy, whether it was because they were going to the supermarket or if they were driving to the airport to then catch a flight. That car was there when they were home and it was gone when they were not at home. So the Blanchard home actually had protective film on the windows, so it made it really hard for people to just look inside and see if they could see anything. They tried knocking on the door, the windows, no one answered. They just didn't feel right. Something wasn't sitting right in their gut, so they called 911. When the police arrived, they had to wait for a search warrant to be issued before they could enter the home, but they allowed one of the neighbors present to climb through a window where he saw the inside of the house was largely undisturbed and that Gypsy's wheelchairs were all still present. When the warrant was finally issued, the police entered the home, and this is where they eventually found Dee Dee's body, but Gypsy was nowhere to be found. They couldn't locate this disabled girl. Police assumed that Gypsy was officially missing and she was most likely kidnapped. And there was a really high chance that whoever had murdered Dee Dee was the person who took Gypsy. A GoFundMe account was set up to pay for Dee Dee's funeral expenses and potentially Gypsy's as well. All who knew the Blanchards feared the worst. There was absolutely no way that Gypsy could survive longer than a day. She needed her oxygen and she needed her feeding tube, and it looked like none of that was taken. Aaliyah, one of the neighbors, actually told police about Gypsy and her secret boyfriend. She showed them the printouts that she had saved, which included his full name. Based on that information, police asked Facebook to trace the IP address from which the post to Dee Dee's account had been made. It turned out that these posts had been made in Wisconsin, and the next day, police agencies in the Waukesha County raided the Go-Johns family home, where they were hiding out. They found Nicholas and Gypsy. Nicholas and Gypsy surrendered, and they were both taken into custody with charges of murder and felony armed criminal action. Everyone back in Springfield was absolutely stoked that Gypsy was okay, but hang on, how is she okay? She's a very, very sick girl. She should be in like poor condition, like straight to hospital. What is going on? Gypsy and Nicholas were soon extradited and held on $1 million bond. But in the announcing news, Greene County Sheriff Jim Arnott warned, things are not always what they appear. The media in Springfield soon reported the truth of the Blanchards' lives, that Gypsy had never been sick and had always been able to walk. But her mother Dee Dee had made her pretend otherwise, using physical abuse to control her from a young age. Arnott urged people not to donate money to the family until investigators learned the extent of the fraud. After the disclosure of how Dee Dee had truly treated her daughter Gypsy, sympathy for Dee Dee as the victim of a violent murder rapidly shifted to her daughter as a long-term victim of child abuse. While the charge of first-degree murder can carry the death penalty, under Missouri law, or life without parole, County Prosecutor Dan Peterson announced that he would not seek it for either Gypsy or Nicholas. And the reason why is because he said that this case was extraordinary and very unusual, which I actually agree with. Imagine finding out the horrible things that went on in that house, the abuse, the lies, and the torturous things that Gypsy had to endure by her own mother. And it's all because Dee Dee wanted extra attention. She didn't really care about her daughter. She just wanted people to feel sorry for her. After her attorney obtained her medical records from Louisiana, he secured a plea bargain for second-degree murder for Gypsy. When she was in police custody, Gypsy was so undermalnourished that during the time that she was in county jail, she had gained around 7 to 8 kilograms, 14 pounds of body fat. She was so undermalnourished, she gained weight. And I'm saying this because apparently it's very common when people are going through this process and they're on trial and they're in county jail, that is the time when people lose weight because of the stress that they are under. But Gypsy gained it. In July 2015, Gypsy accepted the plea bargain and was sentenced to 10 years imprisonment. Nicholas still faced the more severe charge because prosecutors contended that he initiated the murder plot, and he and Gypsy agreed that he was the one who killed Dee Dee. He was also more severely prosecuted due to different personal circumstances. Nicholas was granted less sympathy and understanding due to the lack of involvement in the abuse. Gypsy's plea bargain agreement did not require her to testify against Nicholas. In January 2017, Nicholas's trial was postponed. And this was because the prosecutors requested a second psychiatric exam. His lawyers contended that he had an IQ of 82 and is on the autism spectrum, suggesting that he had diminished capacity, that he wasn't 100% aware of what he was getting himself into. Nicholas had initially waived his right to trial by jury, but changed his mind in June of that year. In December 2017, the judge set his trial for November 2018. In their opening statement, prosecutors alleged that Nicholas had deliberated for over a year before the crime, while his lawyers pointed to his autism and said that Gypsy had formulated the crime and their love-struck client had just done as she had asked. The next day, prosecutors showed jurors the text messages. They were sometimes sexually explicit, that Gypsy and Nicholas had shared in the week before the murder, often using various personas, as well as the knife he had used to commit the murder. In some of the texts, Nicholas asked Gypsy for details about Dee Dee's room and her sleeping habits. These were also supported by video of his interview with police after his arrest, where he admitted killing her. Gypsy testified on the trial's third day. She said that while she had indeed suggested to Nicholas that he kill Dee Dee to end her mother's abuse, she had also considered getting pregnant by him in the hope that once she was carrying Nicholas' child, Dee Dee would have to accept him. Along with the knife that she gave Nicholas, she also stole baby clothes from Walmart so that she could go ahead with the rest of her plan. However, she did confirm that Nicholas didn't really say much about having a family with her, so she didn't really know what his thoughts were. After 4 days, the case went to the jury. Jurors had the option of finding Nicholas guilty of one of 3 murder charges: involuntary manslaughter, second degree, or first degree murder. Or of course, not guilty of any of them. After approximately 2 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict, and Nicholas Gojon was found guilty of first degree murder, an armed criminal action. In February 2019, he was sentenced to life in prison for the conviction. This was the only other option, as prosecutors had declined seeking the death penalty. Nicholas asked Judge David Jones for leniency on the armed criminal action charge, which carries a minimum sentence of only 3 years, saying that he had fallen blindly in love with Gypsy. He received a sentence of 25 years on that charge, which is concurrent with the life sentence. Gypsy was sentenced to 10 years imprisonment, and recently was released after serving 8 years. That is all from me today. I hope that you enjoyed this case and that you learnt something new. I will see you in the next one. Have a good day wherever you are. Bye.